Can I join you?
Sure. We didn't rehearse this.
If you are eating a banana on the street and a man with a red shirt come running up to you, you better hide fast. Huh? Mr. Leong.
为什么要吃香蕉呢？因为很多新疆人没有工作，很饿。因为很多新疆人薪水很低，很饿。因为很多人薪水没有起。我已经很久没有来芳林公园了。为什么很久没有来？去年每个月都来，但是9月，我那些好朋友 Ryan、韩慧慧、Janet、Go 6个新加坡人被告上法庭，公积金抗议。去年9月被禁了，不可以来这里演讲，不可以来这里抗议。哎，他们的案还是进行嘛？为什么不可以来芳林公园？为什么我们新加坡人唯一可以自由讲话的地方也不可以来 ？You know, it's very sad when you look at the labor statistics. In the report this month, talking about wages, in the last 10 years, the average increase a year in the median wage was 3.7%. So sometimes when you read the newspaper, you have to think, wow, so good man, 3.7% average a year? And then you think, oh, it's average. So what is the annualized return for the last 10 years? 3.2%. Then what about inflation? It was about 2.7%. So what is the real increase per annum in the last 10 years for medium gross wages? 0.5%. You know what is 0.5% a year? Imagine 10 years ago you earned $1,000. Huh? Now 10 years later, you had a real increase in income of $50 over. If you earn 2,000 after 10 years, oh, big deal, increase $100 over. And the statistics I've just cited are what they call the resident local statistics. That means including permanent residents, PRs. What is the figure for Singaporeans? Don't know. Why is it that you can disclose the breakdown of the unemployment rate for Singaporeans and PRs, but you cannot break it down for wages? Now we know from the statistics that PRs generally earn 20% more than Singaporeans. So is the wage statistic for Singaporeans worse off? Actually, it gets even better. The statistics that we cite today are including employer CPF contribution. So if you take the statistics like we used to do in the past, excluding employer CPF contribution, is the increase maybe even less than 0.5% a year? And of course, the median is half the population. Does it mean that half the working population actually had less than 0.5 or minus? Now you know why today so many people are eating bananas at Hong Lim Park. You know the problem in Singapore, like many of the speakers have cited, is, let me put it to you in this way. Find me another developed country in the world where any foreigner can come as a tourist and then look for a job and stay and work in Singapore. You know, it's so sad when you look at the labor statistics. In the last 8 years or so, we created 350,000 jobs for locals, means including PRs. Huh? How many of the 350,000 are Singaporeans? We don't know. Now, against the 350,000 jobs we created in the last 8 years, we also created 500,000 jobs for foreigners. Oh, that's not bad enough. Because around the same period, 8 years, we granted 350,000 new PRs and 150,000 new citizens. So how many of the 350,000 local jobs actually went to true blue Singaporeans? We don't know. But you look at the labor statistics, they don't make sense, you know. In the last 10 years, every year, the vacancy keep on going higher and higher, you know. Now it's 60,000 vacancies. What does that mean? Oh, 60,000 jobs cannot find people to work, you know. How can the vacancies keep going up and the labor market is so tight when the wages don't go up? Something is very wrong. They don't make sense at all. You know, if you read today's newspaper, there's a very interesting story. It says, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew had key tests for policies. You know what they're saying is that, oh, you know, when you look at a policy, you must think like Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, the late Mr. Kuan Yew. You must test the outcome of the policies. What is the evidence base? Now, so far we talk about, oh, wages never go up. Then very hard to get a job, etc., etc. Okay, then what's the problem? What about the expenditure side of the equation? You don't get more money coming in. What about the money you have to spend every month? You know, it's so sad. During the late Mr. Lee Kuan Yew's tenure, our HDB was the cheapest public housing in the world. Fast forward today, we have become the most expensive public housing in the world. Every time people ask, oh, can you give us the breakdown of the price that you sell HDB flat into the cost of construction and the cost of land? Oh, no answer. But we estimate it's about 60%. You know why HDB flats, when they started during Mr. Lee Kuan Yew's time, were the cheapest public housing in the world? Because at that time, HDB flats were sold at cost, or at the most at a very small profit of a few percent. Today, if you take the estimate of 60% land cost, are we making profit of 60% on every HDB flat that they sell? No, during Mr. Lee Kuan Yew's time, 1984, they introduced MediSave. So you track back, around that time, the public share of total healthcare spending. What is public share of total healthcare spending? That means every dollar that is spent on healthcare, how much is the government spending? It used to be 50% or more. Now it's only 33%. What does that mean? Government is spending lesser and lesser as Mr. Lee Kuan Yew got older, and the current government began spending lesser and lesser, and you end up spending more and more. You know, our public healthcare spending as a percentage of GDP at 1.6% is the lowest of all the developed countries in the world. When MediSave was introduced in 1984, the CPF contribution rate was 6%. Now, it's as high as 10.5%. So, you know what's the biggest problem with healthcare with Singapore? Every year, the money that you contribute to your MediSave in total, whole of Singapore, we estimate, is more than all the money that the government spent on healthcare, all the money that you can withdraw for your medical expenses, and all the money that you withdraw to pay your premiums. In other words, from a cash flow perspective, the government is not spending a single cent on healthcare And of course, you talk about HDB, same, right? Only government in the world doesn't spend, from a cash flow perspective, a single cent on healthcare or public housing. You know, during Mr. Lee Kuan Yew's tenure, CPF interest rates were very high as 6.5%. But since 1999, 15 years already, we have the lowest real rate of return of all national pension funds in the world. And that's why Singaporeans are so sad. Your wages don't go up. You're competing the whole world for jobs. As a fresh graduate, Daryl say, you take at least 6 months to get a job, then you will take any job that you want. And then you have the most expensive public housing, and the government not spending money on healthcare. But you have the highest pension contribution rate in the world at 37%. But since 1999, I mentioned, we have the lowest rate of return. So what does that mean? We are the only country in the world where the government takes your CPF, invest the money, and then pay you maybe an average of 3+%. Why I say average 3+? Every time we ask, what is the average weighted rate of return of all the CPF accounts year on year in the past? No answer. But it's probably about 3.3 or 3+%. So what happens to the difference? The difference, we become the only government that keeps the difference. So when they keep the difference, you are poor. That's why, as Mary says, you know, when you retire, you're doing like this, you still have to go and clean the food court, you know. You are almost parallel to the floor, right? It's because, on the average, if you calculate, each Singaporean may have lost about $1 million or more because of the difference in the pension rate that the government has been keeping. And no other government in the world does this. So sad. And at the end of the day, you look at our budget. Almost every year, the cash budget surplus, according to IMF fiscal guidelines, is $20 billion every year, which is almost about 1/3 of total government spending. What kind of country have we become after 50 years, you know, where the cash budget surplus is about 1/3, $20 billion of total government spending, and the government, from a cash flow basis, doesn't spend any money on CPF or healthcare or HDB, and then allow the whole world to come to fight with you for jobs to depress your wages. Is it very sad? You know, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew started his political career, as Fatina mentioned, I think, as advisor to the trade unions. Today, we are talking about Labor Day, 50 years later. Considering all that has been said today, it's so sad, right? Don't you think every Singaporean should ask themselves, ask their MP, ask everybody lah, why are the labor statistics so sad? And what are we going to do about it? Thank you.
He's a statistician by training, and as I said just now, I really appreciate that many, many letters he has written to the Straits Times for more than 10 years. And every letter of his contains a germ of truth. And if we're going to put it all together, we have our great Mr. Leong. And I'm glad that Singapore has people like him. Give a round of applause to Mr. Leong.